Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. As you can see, I am up home for the weekend, so filming this back up home. I also need to film it back up home because I didn't have my books in York, so I'm back up home. This video isn't really a video I thought I'd ever be doing, but my Waterstones haul actually was like quite popular, so I thought I'd stick with books because books are a big thing for me, and I'd go through the books that I read in 2019. Thought I'd do this now before it's way too far away from the new year. I know we're at the end of January, but I didn't have my books in York, so I just didn't have time to film it. So I'm just kind of gonna get straight into it because I feel like I can ramble on about books for ages and I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm gonna get started straight away. I've tried to do these, I've tried to order them in the order that I read them, but I'm not really sure this is the correct order, but I knew the ones that I've read recently, but I've tried to do them in the order that I read them. So first one I read 10 books in 2019. Like you might have seen, if you've watched some of my other videos, you might know that I have Erland's syndrome. So basically reading takes a long time for me. So 10 books it's a good amount. This year I'm going to try and read 15 because I'm setting goals for how many I can read, and this year I'm going to read 15. I've already read 2 and it's the end of January, so I'm hoping I'm going to get through more this year, but I read 10. So first one I read was The Girl You Left Behind by Jojo Moyes. This is starting well. So this is the author who wrote Me Before You, which people might know from the massive movie, but yeah, this is another book by her. Basically the storyline is that there's this painting and it connects two women from like now and World War I, and it's kind of how the painting came about back then and how the painting is like modern day, and the girl in now, her husband died recently from, I think he was a soldier, and it's about this painting and the girl in World War I, she's in France, so it's about the Germans occupying, was it Germans? Yeah, Germans occupying France. It was I really enjoyed this book. I'm going to come on to another one of her books soon because I read the third Me Before You book, but I'm actually not the biggest fan of her and how she writes. I feel like sometimes it drags on a little bit. Like in Me Before You, I found that there was points when I was reading it when I was like, this isn't relevant, just get on. But I actually really enjoyed this one, and the switching between different time points actually works quite well. It's really easy to follow and it is really interesting. It's kind of like, I'd say it's romance, but it's not just romance because I'm not the biggest romance person. I don't really like reading romance books, but this was quite a nice one that it wasn't too lovey-dovey, but it did have a bit of romance in there. It was a good book to read. It can make you feel a little bit crap about what happened in World War I. I think it's World War I. Is it 1916? Yeah, World War I. But it's a feel-good book apart from that, and it is a really good story, so I would recommend this one. Next one I read, I've already blabbered on about this and I've blabbered on about it in the Waterstones haul. Actually, a few of these you might see that was in the Waterstones haul, only a few though because I haven't gone through those books. But You're a Badass by Jen Sincero. I still don't know how to say her name properly. I can't recommend this book enough. It is a self-help book, but don't let that put you off. Like, I know self-help books kind of get a bad rep, but it's so good, and she just talks to you as if she's talking to you. It's not like a book where you read it and you're reading a book, like you feel like she's just talking to you. Because I read this around Easter time, I think, and when I came home literally the other day, I finished my book and I didn't have another book to read because my books are up here. So I've already read a few, like 10 pages of this before I went to sleep, and I forgot how much I loved it. Like I mentioned, if you haven't watched the other video, but I'm going through a bit of a rough time at the minute, and it does make you feel better. Like I don't know, it changed my outlook on a lot of things. And I think it's one of those books that you can keep rereading, and it's one of those ones you don't have to reread the whole book. Like I've read like a different, like she's got, how many sections is it? Because she has a contents page, so I think she probably expected people to reread it. So it's 5 parts, and I just read a little bit from part 2. And yeah, it's a really good book. She has other books out. I think there's one about money, and I think there's another one, another like just self-helpy one, and I think I probably will read them. But yeah, I like, it's one of those ones where you can tell I've read it because like it won't even stay together anymore. So yeah, I really recommend this one. Next one I read is kind of like a classic. It's called The Midwife, by Jennifer Worth. Yeah, Jennifer Worth. I mean, I feel like everybody's heard of Called The Midwife now because of BBC's drama. I watched the drama before I read the book. I only actually started watching Called The Midwife. I've just put you on silent. I feel like it's a thing in my video. My phone always has to go off. I've literally just turned it on silent. That should be it. Interrupt it. It's fine. Yeah, I only watched the season, like I binged it about 2 years ago, and I really love the season. This is only the first book, and I've only read the first book. If you watch like the series, this one is just with Jen, because obviously she wrote it. If you don't know what this is, basically it follows a girl who is just qualified to be a midwife, and she goes and lives in what's the word, convent? No, it can't be a convent. It's basically, she goes and lives with nuns and is a midwife with these nuns, and it's just about the stories of the women who she helped and a bit about her. It's actually, in the book compared to the series, it's not as much about her personal life. There's only little bits in there, and it doesn't follow what the drama does. This is more about the stories of being a midwife, and it just, I really enjoyed reading this, and it makes you, I think it makes you appreciate the NHS and appreciate everything midwives do, because, and appreciate how far we've come, because obviously there's so much stuff in here, because this was set just after the wars in the 1950s, yeah. So we've advanced like so much since this, and I don't know, it reminded me how lucky we are about how much we've advanced. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I'd recommend reading it if anybody's interested in that kind of thing. I quite like things that are based off true life but have a little bit more like drama to it, like making it fictionalized a little bit, but it's still based off real life. So this is kind of up my street. But I think it is a book that everyone should read, just to appreciate what women go through for childbirth and how far we've come, and the NHS and what midwives do. So yeah, would recommend. I've just noticed as well, my nose looks really red, I think, but it's really cold and my nose goes red as soon as I'm cold. So if my nose is really red, it is because I'm cold. And I know people are going to be like, well, you're wearing a vest top, but all my clothes are in the wash, and it was either this or that grey jumper that I've worn in like 3 videos already, so I'm wearing a bodysuit. Right, next one I read was Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. He wrote, what is it, Reasons to Stay Alive. I haven't actually read that one. I picked this one up because it was recommended, who was it recommended by? I can't remember. Oh, I think I might have just found this in Waterstones actually when I was in the self-help section. So I don't really know how to describe this book. I really like Matt Haig, but with this book, so I'll read the blurb, because the blurb, yeah, is it the blurb? These are one of those basic words that I've suddenly forgotten. Anyway, I'll read it because I don't know how to describe it. So, the world is messing with our minds. What if there was something we could do about it? Looking at sleep, news, social media, addiction, work and play, Matt Haig invites us to feel calmer, happier, and question the habits of the digital age. This book might even change the way you spend your precious time on Earth. So I was kind of, when I picked this up, I was expecting a self-help book. I was expecting like a book where it was telling you, this is how you attack life, this is how you do that kind of thing. But I actually found it really stressful. So the structure of it is like, it's literally just, it has a title, and then that like chapter almost lasts for like 2-3 pages. I think the longest one in here was 5 pages. Like, they are very short. And this isn't a an attack on him because I like him, but I kind of just felt like it was just not complaining, but it was making me feel more stressed. It was kind of like, here's another problem, here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem. I think personally I only found like 2 solutions to problems in this book. My mind works a bit differently to other people's, but it just stressed me out. It made me feel more stressed about the world and about the planet and how we were going down the wrong way. And yeah, so personally I wouldn't recommend this one. But I mean, he's a good writer, it's written really well, and he kind of like bears his soul, so it is good. And I mean, there's loads of recommendations on here, like literally there's like 4 on the front, 5 on the back, and then there's more inside. So some people did enjoy it, but personally it just wasn't for me. Next one I read was Still Me by Jojo Moyes. This is the third, is it third? Yeah, the third book in the Me Before You trilogy, so it's the final book. If you didn't know it was a trilogy, it's a trilogy. So the Me Before You one follows the same pattern as the movie. So Lou Clark, if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, Lou Clark is she's kind of like a free, like, I don't know how to describe her. She's just this happy-go-lucky, that is the phrase I was looking for, happy-go-lucky girl who's in her own town, and then she gets hired, well, she finds a job looking after a quadriplegic, and she looks after him, but then he decides to end his own life and she has to deal with all that kind of thing. So in the first book that follows that story. The second book follows her after he dies. This one follows her when she moves to New York and works for a new family, kind of as a carer, but kind of as a friend to this very rich family in New York. I think out of all 3, like I said, I wasn't that keen on her writing, and I've read Me Before You because somebody told me to read it, and I don't know, I think I preferred the movie to the book, and that's very rare I say that. The second one was better, I think. Well, I don't think it was better in terms of the story, but I think, like, because there's not a movie of that one, I did enjoy it. But this one was the best one in my opinion. It was really good. The storyline's good, the way it flows through. I think it is quite long. I think it's too, I don't know, not too long, but it is a long book, but you don't really feel like it's a hassle finishing the book. But I enjoyed this one a lot, and I think it addresses some good stuff. It's like Me Before You, really. It's not as much of a romance, it's more about Lou finding herself and discovering what she wants to do, and this relationship with this new family she's working with. But I would recommend it, but obviously you've got to read the first 2. Yeah, it's a good book. Next one, I don't know how many am I on? So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 6th one. 6th one is Rune Marks by Joanne Harris. Is that, yeah? So this is another one that's really hard to describe. It's basically about, well, right, so when I bought this one, the blurb basically, I'm not going to read it all because it's a freaking long blurb, but the whole thing was like, if the Vikings had shaped our world instead of the Romans. So it's like, oh, it's going to be like an alternate reality kind of thing. But it's basically following the Nordic gods of like Loki and Thor, and it's set in a different reality, and it follows this girl called Maddie. Is it Maddie? Yeah, Maddie, and her interactions with the gods. That's kind of a spoiler, but it's not a spoiler. So everyone kind of has, well, not everyone, she has powers and nobody else has powers, and it follows her discovering why she has these powers and her interactions. I did not like this book. I think it's obvious as to how I'm describing it. I didn't enjoy it at all. This is it for me. I think it's tried to go into like a Game of Thrones kind of vibe, because right at the beginning, let me find it, it's got all of these like diagrams as to how the gods work, and then maps, you know, like in Game of Thrones where at the beginning it has like the maps of the 7 kingdoms and stuff. In this, and then it has who the characters are and a little bit about the characters, and the runes, and I don't know, it was way more complicated than it needed to be, I think. And this was meant to be a teen novel, I think. because it's basically, it's a woman who wrote Chocolat, and everywhere it said that it's her first attempt of getting into children's literature, but it was so complicated, and the story just, I didn't feel like it had a good, like, it didn't have a story. I think it just went, I think it was way too big for what it should have been. I think, yeah, there's another book. I don't know if it's a trilogy. I think there's definitely another book, because it ended and I hadn't finished, and I'm not going to read the next one. It was just complicated and long. Like, I kept reading it and I was like, how can this still be going on about what it's going on about? So I wouldn't, this is another one I wouldn't recommend. I didn't enjoy it. But if like fantasy is your thing, maybe it might be okay. Fantasy is kind of my thing, but I just thought it was way complicated, and it was so, I don't know, so confusing at the same time, but simple, and it's like, well, why does that need to be, like, I just didn't enjoy it, so I wouldn't recommend that one. Next one is not, it's not a novel. It's not, I wouldn't say it's self-help, it's more of a business book. So this is oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley. It's basically about, it's a business book, essentially. I know it's not really a novel, so it's not kind of within the same realm as this, but this was a good book. If you were looking for a business book and how to get your business off the ground and how to run a business, this is a really good book. The whole premise is trying to get your business oversubscribed, so your whole business has more people wanting it than you can give. And the way he writes it is really good. He's English, I'm pretty sure he's English. So it was really easy to relate to, because sometimes business books, when they're American, it's hard because they have different things to us. So you can see it's got loads of notes in, because I stuck notes in when I couldn't write notes on my phone. And Jack's actually, I'm making Jack read this because obviously we've started a business. So it was a good book, and I'd recommend it. It had some really, really good advice in there. Obviously not everything's going to apply to everyone. It helps with self-employed, I would say. It's really good for a business if you have a product. It's a bit, I think some things can't really apply if you are providing a service, but there is loads of good stuff in there if you do provide a service. So like, it's still good for like personal trainers and coaches, like any kind of business. You can read this and get some really useful information out of it. So I would recommend this if you own a business, basically. Next one, I was gonna say next one's a classic. The last three are all kind of classics. Well, classics, not classics in the sense of like Jane Austen and stuff, but popular books. So Handmaid's Tale, I haven't watched the series, I've only read the book. The book, I enjoyed it, but it's a bit hard hitting. It can be a bit confusing, and it can be a bit slow, I think. Like, so for example, I was halfway through the book, and I have started watching the series actually, but I think I've only watched the first 3 episodes, 2. It's one of those ones I started it and forgot I was watching it, and now I haven't watched the rest of them. But I think I've only watched 2 episodes, and that's basically covered half of the book already. Like, nothing happened till quite far through, so it is like a slow burner. You gotta keep going through it, and I can completely see why she's released a second one, because it ended on a cliffhanger. I don't know how she left it for so long without writing a second one. I don't think I'm going to read the second one. I think it's the kind of thing that I'll much prefer the series than the book, because it was just so slow and I get bored very easily. But it is a good book. I'd recommend to read it. It's just one of those ones that I think is a good one to have read and said you've read. So yeah, I would recommend it, but it is quite slow. Next one is a classic, Sherlock Holmes. And these are the first 2 books. So it's A Study in Scarlet and the Signs of Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, obviously. These are brilliant books that I've only ever read one Sherlock Holmes book, and I read it in English, and it was I can't remember what it's called, but it was the one with the painted men. And actually I read another one, and it was the one in the mansion with all the animals. I can't remember what that's called. But I've read them in English, and I've always wanted to get into Sherlock Holmes books. So Jack actually bought me this one, because I've been saying I've wanted to read Sherlock Holmes for ages, and these are the first 2. They are really good. If you've had any kind of exposure to Sherlock Holmes already, it's pretty much how it goes. But if you've only watched Sherlock, as in like the BBC one Sherlock, it is different. This is the classic set in 1800s Sherlock Holmes, but I love Sherlock, like I love Sherlock the series. It's so interesting to see where Sherlock picked up the bits and didn't pick up the bits. Like there's a piece of dialogue in here which is pretty much exactly the same as it is in the series, but obviously completely different. And then there's the whole one with the taxi. In this, a taxi's a horse-drawn carriage, whereas in that it's an actual taxi driver in a black cab. So it's really interesting seeing the two. They're easy books to read, I think. Like they're easy to read. Apart from obviously some of the language is quite old, but it's just something you have to do. With that as well, there is some kind of, you can tell the old language, like there was a little bit of racism in there, which obviously isn't great, but for the time it was written, it comes in there and you've just kind of got to skim over it and just pretend it's not happening, so it doesn't affect the story in any way, kind of thing. But yeah, I read through them dead quickly. I was shocked at how they were written, because some, like in the first one, it has his thing, like Sherlock Holmes's thing, and then it actually goes back to when it happened and wrote it about when the crime was happening and all the lead up to it. But it was, I enjoyed that about it, and I can't wait to read more. Jack got me another one for Christmas, so I am going to read more of Sherlock Holmes. And I do think the ones, if you like watching Sherlock Holmes, just try and read one. They are brilliant books. I mean, they're popular for a reason. Right, final one is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This is a big book. Like if you look at it the size of my head and the size of my hand, it's a big book. I would say it's worth it. It depends on what you like to read. This has been, obviously, this video, I read a lot of genres. This is based in 1800s again. I actually think it's pretty much smack bang the same time as Sherlock Holmes, because I think it's Queen Victoria and Victorian London. So I found this one recommended. Actually, I have two copies of this book, because I bought it because I'd read some, like people had recommended it to me, and Jack bought me it because he read the same things. I saw loads about this because I love books with twists. I love books that are a bit thrillery, and this one kept coming up and coming up and coming up, and it was good. It was just very long. It's split into three sections. I'm pretty sure 3 sections. So it does, like, you can stagger it a bit. It is a big book. The story, basically, it follows a, is she an orphan? Yeah, so it follows this girl who was orphaned at birth, but she's had a family looking after her, and basically, it's not a spoiler, she gets drawn in and asked to help this guy in kind of a big con, trying to con a rich family so that they can have their money. Obviously it's set in 1800s, and I'd say that's the vibe of this book. It's a very Victorian England kind of book, but it has some really good twists in there that are really quite modern, which make the book really. There are a few twists in there, because obviously I read this knowing there was going to be a twist, and then I was like, all right, there's the twist, and then there'd be another one, and I was like, oh well, that must be the main twist, and then there'd be another one, and then another one. So it is a good book. I was kind of putting this one off, like putting off reading this one because it's so big, but I didn't fly through it, but I made it through without thinking I wish this one would finish. So I would recommend this. I did enjoy it. It's got really good twists. If you're interested in historical fiction, I would recommend it. So that is all of the books I read in 2019. I've got a nice big pile, look. Hey, this is going to be bigger next year. I'm going to read 15 next year. I'm going to do it. So yeah, that was the books I've read. I hope that I kind of timed it right because the sun's going down. I think you could see it probably went dark throughout this video. I hope that was of interest to someone. I just thought with the Waterstones one being so popular that maybe, I don't know, maybe you'd be interested in the reviews of the books that I've read, and I will do a review of the books that I've had in that Waterstones haul when I get through them all. yeah, I thought it would be a nice idea because books are such a big thing. I'm a proper book nerd. I love reading. I read every day pretty much. So I thought, why not do a video on something that I love? Well, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Well done if you made it to the end. If you're new, please subscribe. If you're interested in book videos, just let me know and I will do more book videos. I would have no problem with that. If you're already a subscriber and you're like, I don't want to see more book stuff, also let me know because I'd love to put more content out that you guys want to see. So yeah, please like if you enjoyed, leave a comment if you've got any ideas or anything you'd like to see, or if you've read any books. Let me know if you disagree with what I said. Like if there was one that I said that I didn't recommend but you enjoyed it, let me know. Like I'd love to hear people's opinions on books. So yeah, I shall see you in the next one. Peace. Have a lovely week. Bye. Mwah.